Well, now, we East Midlanders might be forgiven for feeling a little depressed this week. A whole pile of reports have put us right at the bottom for wealth, health and just about everything, really. Parts of our region are among the worst for how long people live, and one of our cities is said to be the poorest in the country. Well, we'll be finding out what our politicians are doing about it all in a moment, but first, Des Coleman has been on a not-so-magical misery tour.
Cheers, mate. So, let's start our tour in Leicester, which is in the bottom 20 when it comes to people dying early. There's high unemployment here too. So what do you want our politicians to do about it?
I think the government should be attacking the younger ages a lot earlier with education and informing them about healthier lifestyles and healthier ways to live.
What do you think the politicians should do about it?
Probably scrap the chicken shops. Scrap the chicken shops.
Well, I think it's everybody their own decision, you know. If you're 18 years old and you're buying cigarettes and you want to die early, it's your choice, you know. It's not politicians' fault. Everybody have a brain and everybody can think for them own selves.
There's better news here in Rutland, a wealthy county that does very well in national figures. Unemployment runs at 1.8%, and when it comes to health, well, it's in the top 10.
I think they can help to boost pride in the area. In Rutland, you know, we have a lot of events that a lot of the local councillors are involved in, and politicians, and I think that would help to make people feel better about where they live.
From a politician's point of view, to try and pinpoint something they could do, it's a no-no, absolute no-no, impossible.
Now I'm somewhere which could be classed as the country's misery capital, Nottingham. Official figures say that people that work here have the lowest disposable income, and when it comes to health, they're in the bottom 10.
Because I've lived here for 24 years and I wouldn't have thought that it was a place that was so deprived, actually. I wouldn't have thought it was. I'm sure other areas have got worse problems than we have.
You can't force people to eat good food. You can't force people to engage in good education. People can choose to opt out.
It's not down to the politicians to increase people's life expectancy. It's up to the people themselves. Look after their health, look after themselves.
Well, I'm joined now by Andrew Pritchard, Director for Policy and Infrastructure for East Midlands Councils and Association of Local Authorities in our region. Andrew, is it really as bad as all that?
Well, I mean, there clearly are some challenges, particularly in some of our urban areas and more deprived communities. Some of that's been accentuated by the way in which this data has been collected on a very sort of localised basis. And if you look at the generality, then you could argue the East Midlands as a whole is not out of step with many other parts of England.
You say it's been accentuated by these figures, but are these figures really accurate? Because it seems quite incredible, really, doesn't it, that Nottingham comes out as the poorest city, and yet the Office for National Statistics says the average disposable income is less than £11,000.
I think if you look at the boundaries around Nottingham, which Nottingham City control, compared with the conurbation of Nottingham, which obviously includes more wealthy areas, there's a clear difference there. And if you looked at the conurbation as a whole, you would come to a different conclusion, perhaps. That's not to say there are not challenges, because clearly they are, but it does depend on how you look at the data.
OK, so Andrew, what are MPs doing about this? There clearly are problems, as we all know.
Well, the answer is we got to drive economic growth and employment. I would take issue with the fact that there's all this misery in the East Midlands. People are moving to live in the East Midlands for the quality of life. We've got a growing population in the East Midlands. Houses are going up to a premium.
But not everybody's feeling the benefit of that, so you can understand why people feel a little bit down in the current
climate. Well, all I'll say,
in
my constituency, unemployment fell by 79 last month, 248 over the last 12 months. We've got 2 private sector investments coming in the next couple of years, which are going to generate over 8,000 new jobs.
Not as gloomy, he's saying, John. Is that the picture that you see out there?
I think the East Midlands is quite imbalanced, actually, on the economic front. In my city centre constituency, which was on the film, unemployment is still very high. It came down by single figures last month, but it's still a lot higher than it was at the general election. So you can see across the East Midlands that, in different areas there is still levels of deprivation, there's still unemployment problems. And when you look at some of the other figures, like the Regional Growth Fund figures, figures, which we've talked about on this programme before. We still seem to be bottom of the pile in that.
But you all always tell me as well that you MPs should get together more. Are you getting together on this? Because this is crucial, really, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And we've got the All-Party East Midlands group, and MPs do work together. We work together, all of us, singing from the same hymn sheet on Midland mainline electrification. Let's get on with it. Let's get on with these projects.
We work together on Glenfield.
Glenfield's another one. But there's lots of infrastructure projects that we can work together on. Let's just get on with it.
So, Andrew Pritchard, any optimistic signs that you can tell us about, please?
Well, I mean, I think this is really good stuff that we've got around our competitiveness, around some of our manufacturing, some of our construction work, some of our high growth engineering type stuff, and that is really positive. So there is good reason to think actually there's a good offer in the East Midlands. There's a good housing offer in the East Midlands as well.
What about infrastructure, big infrastructure projects?
Well, of course, we've got the Midland Mainline electrification and upgrade, which is coming forward. There's the A453, which has been a long-held infrastructure priority, which is now happening. So we have made some progress on those sorts of issues. There is more to do, and I think the kind of initiatives that John and Chris Heaton-Harris have been leading on the all-party group of MPs. What we want to do is to work with that for East Midlands councils. If we can actually get that joined upness around some of those key issues.
And Andrew sounds very positive. Why has he got such reason to be cheerful?
North West Leicestershire is already, before these new projects come on stream, we're already in the top 20 constituencies for economic growth in the whole country already.
Do councils, the councils, do they join up with MPs to try and work on this?
I mean, I think yes, we do, and I think that what we've probably got to do more of is on a more strategic basis doing that. It tends to be sort of issue and quite localised at the moment. Perhaps there's a role for a more strategic engagement between council leaders and MPs to try and push this kind of agenda.
Here's a little bit more good news. Apparently, Derbyshire has the best figures in the country for liver disease, and many parts of the region have unemployment below 2%. Not just Rutland, and of course, the latest figures, of course, show that unemployment is falling. So there are reasons to be cheerful.
Yes, and if you compare our situation with the West Midlands, for example, I mean, West Midlands unemployment rose last time and is significantly higher than the East Midlands.
I was speaking to
that's a real challenge.
The Public Affairs Director for British Airways International Airline Group, and he said that all the new airplanes that BA are ordering will have Rolls-Royce engines, and more good news for the East Midlands.
That's right, we've got lots of manufacturing in the East Midlands, Rolls-Royce, Toyota, lots of food manufacturing, and a city like Leicester and Leicestershire has a lot of food manufacturing where we export food to Europe, the Middle East, even India, and that's something else we've got huge potential in. Trade with India, because we've got lots of diaspora communities, particularly in Leicester and Nottingham, and we really should be building on that.
Would you like to see politicians shouting up more for the East Midlands, Andrew?
I think that's what we've got to try and do. I think that perhaps we hide our light under a bushel sometimes, and perhaps we don't tell the story in the way which perhaps other parts of the country do. I mean, I know the West Midlands and the North East MPs and their councils very active in telling the story of their part of the world.
So they could be more active, is what you're telling us.
It's interesting. There was always a lot of lobbyists coming down from Yorkshire saying about how good Yorkshire is. I think we should do more of that.
We want to know about Yorkshire.
No, we want to talk about the East Midlands. I think.
So when are you next meeting then?
Well, we've just had a meeting. I was re-elected as the co-chair with Chris, and we're going to have a meeting before the summer where East Midlands councils are going to come along and tell us about what's going on. So
we'll tell us what happened at the meeting and what's happening.
We already had the AGM meeting. That's just a few weeks ago to get everyone re-elected, and I was re-elected. But it was agreed that our big priority will be talking about the East Midlands economy. So we're going to get East Midlands councils down. We're going to get these LEPs, these local economic partnerships. They're going to come down. So there'll be lots of work going on over the next few months, and we'll keep you posted on it.
You better had. Andrew Pritchard, thank you very much indeed for being our guest in the studio.